NFL Divisional Round playoffs are upon us. I'm Cris. I'm with Ron. There's nobody watching. Oh, no, there's finally one person watching. Okay, 5. Okay, it goes by pretty quick. What's going on, Ron?
Oh, interesting chess match with the divisional round or actually the early wild card playoffs. I enjoyed most of the games that I saw. It was good to concentrate on one game at a time and not be overwhelmed. Cris, tomorrow is one of the biggest days of the year for me. And you'll never quite guess why, but tomorrow is the purge the paperwork stuff. I write. The desk is a mess. The college stuff, the NFL stuff. Tomorrow we start throwing some things away and putting stuff in the boxes. It's purge the writing stuff day. So looking forward to tomorrow as much as getting ready for next week.
I should, that's probably an area that I'm weak in, that I should have a purge the paperwork day because I do build it up. I find that when I do purge paperwork, that there's a tinge of guilt involved. But I find you can't purge it without at least glancing at it. And when you glance at what you're throwing away and the volume of notes and thoughts and time is just ridiculous. You look at that and you go, oh my God. It's just like goes right in the trash.
Yeah. I keep 2 weeks, 2 years of the individual team sheets that I do, college and pro, and some of the schedules that I do, the first week schedule, the 5th week schedule, the 18th week schedule. So now I get to go back to 2022 and purge all the 2022 stuff and then just keep the 2023 and 2024. So it's overload. So there's a lot of stuff, and some of the stuff that I've written, it's still there on a Word document or an Excel document. But if I printed it out, it goes in the trash now.
I have, I'm in a little different situation because I print out my sheets and the schedules, and I print out extra sheets, and I have so many notes, so many scribbles. I have a harder time throwing it away because when I go back and look at them later on, it triggers thoughts and ideas, and there's, believe it or not, there's still value in it. I've had to go back through years of paperwork, the manual paperwork, and it's just fascinating what comes back up to the surface as you go through week by week by week. So
I do that with the draft stuff. If I look back, I might look back at a 2017 draft report that I did, 32 or 64 pages, whatever it is. And there's some fascinating nuggets that I enjoy reading 6, 7, 8, 10 years later. So the draft stuff is still available for me so that I can see exactly what I wrote about these people. And then any notes that I have, I'm throwing out that I said, well, wait, I really like that note. I'll just put it on the recent team sheet. So some of the notes will still be there, but a lot of the paperwork will be gone.
Well, I suppose we should be talking about actual games.
Yeah, necessary exercise to go back over last week. I think everybody should do that. What did we miss? How do we avoid the danger of overcompensating for what we saw? That knee-jerk reaction, wow, this team was unbelievable. Now I have to reevaluate them on just 30 or 60 minutes of action. So Cris, I definitely think that it's worthy, especially playoff time, that we go back about what we look at. Not to talk about bad beats or this or that or whatever, but to talk about the actual nuts and bolts, what we got right, what we got wrong. And for me, usually, it's a usual thing for me. Straight bets only, no parlays, no teases, just what did I do? What didn't I do? There was one regret that I didn't do, but we'll get into that.
Well, let's start out. Let's at least take a quick look at what we saw in each game last week. There should be a reminder that the nature of the NFL in itself is that it's a short sample size sport. I mean, there just aren't that many games. So it's, it's cool or responsible to quote, say, well, it's small sample size, you need more input. But the reality of the situation is the sport doesn't afford us the luxury of long sample size of being worthwhile, frankly. So that's what we have to fight with. You're exactly right when you sit there and say you can't overreact to little things, but it feels like you have to react sometimes. So that's how I respond to what you said.
Okay. LA Houston, what did you glean from that game, the Chargers and the Texans?
I was surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised that the rookie quarterback came away with the win. I expected him to win. We discussed that I think the nature of the tools that quarterbacks have coming into the league are different than what they used to be. The coaching is improved dramatically. There's a variety of reasons where rookie quarterbacks are all not cookie cutters. Well, he's not the rookie quarterback, but young quarterback. But these young quarterbacks, they learn quick. I was surprised the Chargers were unable to keep the game closer. They just seemed to fall apart, and the Houston defense just took over in the second half. And just didn't expect that. If you would have thought that one of the two teams would have melted down in the second half, you would have thought it would have been the inverse. Think about the Lions and Texans when they played each other. Houston had a great first half, melted down the second half, or Detroit was able to take over, and this was the opposite. So I just thought that was kind of strange. What about you?
Yeah, so I think the pre-work that we did on this game was excellent. And I really like the way I approached this particular game from the Houston standpoint. I still think you can come up with a million stats. So the bottom line is Houston's pass defense, for whatever reason, was still underrated, how they would frustrate Herbert. And so that wasn't surprising to me. Nico Collins, your stars rise in the playoff chase. Nico Collins was excellent. The pass protection was decent enough. We talked about the fact that Harbaugh's a really good coach. He's been in these situations, and I have no problem with that. But did people underestimate DeMeco Ryans, because he's been doing a good job all along with this defense and with his game planning? Joe Mixon came to play, got the tough yards. The one takeaway I have on the Chargers is I don't want to hear that people dishing on Herbert. I don't want to say that Herbert can't win this, can't win that, whatever. You're talking about sample size, and I know they had a meltdown against Jacksonville in the playoffs and stuff like that. But the bottom line is this is Jim Harbaugh's first team. This is Herbert's first rodeo with Jim Harbaugh. He had one rookie wide receiver and no other help at wide receiver, average tight ends, a running game, a little bit of a dinosaur running game with Dobbins and Edwards, because they're kind of straight ahead, not versatile runners. I think we need a second draft to evaluate Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I don't want to hear that Herbert had a bad game. I know he was frustrated. I know he had a bunch of turnovers, but I want to give Houston credit rather than the Chargers blame.
Yeah, I'll kind of bite on that a little bit. It seems like the critics of Herbert overreact too fast, and the people that want to back him prop him up too fast. It is kind of odd. I'm kind of right in the middle of the fence and think, he's got potential, and he's never as bad as he looks, and I don't think he's as good as he looks in his best games either. So,
yeah.
The one thing I did want to mention is that the comment that you made actually saved me, because I was looking at betting that under, and you had that nice reminder last week of, well, once you get into the playoffs, these teams get desperate and crazy things happen at the end of games. And I started thinking about it, and I go, yeah, that is kind of a low total, and one touchdown that you don't expect, or just that is silly, can send it over. So I did
Yeah.
avoid the full game under, but I took the first half under, which was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the flip side of that is look at what happens in the first half. Is there going to be a style that's going to lend itself well to feeling each other out and maybe some unders? We've seen that in some college games. The bowl semifinal games were tremendous examples of how these teams are a little bit nervous and tight at the beginning, and you can do that no score first 6 minutes kind of thing. So there are other alternatives if you like the under without having to say, oh my goodness, what a bad beat at the end of the game, when you know you're trying everything possible. At least I would say 11 out of 12 teams tried everything possible at the end of game. We can get into the 12th team later.
I guess I didn't go in time order. I was going in rotation order, but Pittsburgh, Baltimore, that was just annoying. I don't know what it is, but Pittsburgh's actually starting to just really annoy me. I just find them flabbergasting, just because they go out and they lose all those games in a row, and they didn't really seem to play with any spirit, and it's just so atypical. I think, we've always considered J.J. Watt the heart and soul of that team. I saw some stat that he hadn't had a pressure or sack or something in some ridiculous amount of plays. So he was not seen or heard. And Pittsburgh just leaves a bad taste in my mouth this year.
Well, if we flash back to the beginning of the season, the second half of the season was brutal, and maybe we saw Pittsburgh's true colors. They can't compete with the big boys with Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator, with an offensive line that started, I believe, 2 rookies and was being shuffled around and is a year or two away from really being that good, with a number 2 wide receiver, Van Jefferson, and a number 3 wide receiver, Mike Williams. What were realistic expectations in August for this Pittsburgh team? But 10 wins is overachieving. The way they achieved them by not winning much at the end of the year is underachieving. But I think it was a victim of the schedule and TJ Watt not being completely healthy. And that 70% pass defensive stat that I mentioned last week, that kind of opened my eyes, saying that, wait a second, they haven't performed to the level that we think they have in the last actually 12 weeks of the season. So I was not on the game because I respect the Pittsburgh-Baltimore rivalry, but I'm not surprised that Lamar Jackson took it upon himself to do what he needed to do. And then the nickname for Derrick Henry, the closer. I mean, there's a weapon that they didn't have last year, and I think Baltimore's a better team this year than they were 12 months ago.
I think my problem with Pittsburgh is the lack of focus, lack of energy. It's not the fact that they didn't get the results. It's the fact that they didn't look energized. They weren't making smart decisions. Their heads weren't in the game all too often.
Yeah. Russell Wilson's a weird guy to evaluate. When, at times, Baltimore, we've seen it before. That third quarter wasn't Baltimore's best quarter. Sometimes it's not Baltimore's best quarter because they let teams back in games. And for a while, Pittsburgh was making a game of it. I still think Baltimore is a little bit vulnerable in terms of protecting leads, but to have Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter is massive for them.
Denver and Buffalo. I figured it out about even before Buffalo. Denver scored right away, and even before Buffalo scored on their first drive. I don't know what it was, but I texted at least one person, and I said they got no shot. They were just slicing Denver's defense up like butter, and I don't know. I had the instant feeling that was going to be it for Denver, and it ended up being it for Denver. And I think what's lost in that game is I think Buffalo played a pretty bad game, and they ended up whitewashing them.
Interesting take. I knew 5 minutes and 10 minutes into the game, kind of like you, that Denver was not going to do it, and I had Denver in the game. I have not seen Buffalo be this physical and this animated on both sides of the ball in a long time. It was as if they were playing to win the Super Bowl. If Buffalo keeps that up, they're going to be formidable, despite the fact the stats sheet says they shouldn't be formidable. They dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And when Peyton went ahead and did that fake punt and it worked, regardless of what happened afterwards, the light went on to me, and it immediately told me that Peyton knows he can't match up this year with this team, and he needs to steal an extra possession. And so it worked, but it told me that Peyton doesn't think his team is good enough. And sure enough, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah. Good season, though, for Denver overall.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciated it. I think they're on the right track. Everybody said doom and gloom, 5 wins, 5.5 wins for the season, not even close to that. And, that division is really, really tough. I don't know what the Raiders are going to bring to the table, but the Chargers are going to keep getting better as they mold that team under Jim Harbaugh's kind of style. And I think Denver's going to keep getting better too. I mean, Nick's first year of the NFL. They want to do a little bit different things, maybe with the offensive and defensive lines, but they're going to be a formidable team moving forward. But the issue is Buffalo's moving forward, and Josh Allen and the entire team looked like they were so engaged in this game. I just didn't expect that to that extent.
Oh, next game was Green Bay and the Eagles. Green Bay gave Philadelphia every possible welcome mat to wipe them away. I mean, I think they had 4 turnovers.
Jordan Love being Jordan Love.
Yeah, and Jordan Love. If you were on Green Bay, it was frustrating to watch. It was just a miracle you were still in the game at all. And Philadelphia just did not have their act together. We mentioned, off the concussion protocol, quarterbacks don't come back very strong oftentimes, and Hurts didn't look like himself. And it seems like the Eagles kind of got away with one. There was the perfect storm with a banged-up Green Bay that kept on getting injured and in worse shape the whole game. Love's, target just kept falling. What's he supposed to do? So it was a perfect setup for the Eagles. I'll just be curious on where they go from here. I guess we'll talk about that later. But Philadelphia got a free ride on this one, I think.
Yeah, this is a game I think I have the most comments and probably the most controversial comments on. And a lot of what you said I agree with, and I'll be enhancing that. I liked Philly, but I didn't play them. And I don't ever regret not playing them, but I didn't play them primarily because I was really concerned about Hurts coming back. And I didn't know what we'd get about him. And I think Philly stole this one because people are going to take exception to this, but believe me, this is true. Green Bay's game plan was excellent. They tested Philadelphia with Jacobs, and Jacobs had some success. He was moving the chains. He was involved in the pass game, and he himself got hurt a little bit. But, they had immediate offensive line injuries that hurt Jordan Love and caused him to throw without thinking. That was a problem. They didn't have Watson to start the game at wide receiver. Jaden Reed actually was starting to do what I was hoping that he would do in general, not as a fan of Green Bay, but I said, Reed needs to step up his game. That's what I wrote beforehand. And he did step up his game, and then he got hurt, and then he was out of the game. Romeo Doubs, who's pretty sure-handed and a very reliable receiver, he got hit hard, and he was out of the game. So now you're left with Malik Heath and Bo Melton. And Cris, if you saw how they tiptoed around the sideline and couldn't get 2 feet in bounds and then couldn't get a route run successfully, there was really nothing Jordan Love could do. I mean, and then you had Quay Walker go down defensively, and you had another starter go down defensively. Green Bay was down 5 players. Jordan Love wasn't 100%. And Jacobs was in and out of the lineup in the fourth quarter. You noticed he was either gassed or beat up as well. Green Bay did everything they could. And I think at full strength, Green Bay steals this win, and they just didn't get it.
Yeah, I agree. It's you kind of feel bad for Green Bay. They had a good game plan, and they just didn't have the personnel to finish it out.
Washington, they played really well, and we'll talk about Philly again because I'm not going to take too much away out of this Philly. That was a game they survived, and let's not overreact. We'll talk about that.
Washington and Tampa Bay. That was about the game that I expected. I thought Washington would win the game or had a good chance of winning the game. I didn't think they'd get blown out, but I don't have much else to say about that game.
This was my regret game. I knew, and I mentioned to you on Tuesday and to Ted on Thursday, that Washington was a technical play. That was the right side plus 3 points. I didn't play it because I just got fixated on, well, Baker is doing something amazing. And Baker was 15 of 18. The problem was Washington's game plan, they played keep away. Baker never had the ball. 18, I mean, they couldn't get Irving going until the third or fourth quarter because they didn't have enough touches in the first half. 18 passes is not a typical Baker Mayfield day, and 15 out of 18 is fantastic. But you got to love how Daniels and Washington kept moving the chains. So it was kind of a toss-up game. You said, yeah, I gave a little bit of an edge to Washington, but really it was a flip a coin game, and one fumble turned out to be the difference. Give credit to Daniels. His poise is amazing.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview this morning with Zach Ertz and talking about him, and he was mentioning that in training camp, Cliff had told him, you got to check out the rookie camp videos. And he didn't want to. He's like, come on, I've been in this league for 12 years. I don't need to see this shit, blah, blah, blah. You got to check this out. And he said, I watched this guy complete every single pass for 2 days. Didn't miss a pass. And went on to say that this guy is just as level-headed as possible. You can't tell whether the guy's up 21 points or down 21 points. It just doesn't phase him one direction or the other. He's just cool and collected and a good demeanor for a quarterback.
Yeah. Good game.
Last night's game made me sick to my stomach. I was on the Vikings, and you just knew right away, for whatever reason, that this was going to be a repeat of what we saw against the Lions. I've got to imagine Darnold's lost, between $20 and $25 million a year over the last 14 days, and it just brutal. You could see on the sideline that Minnesota was unemotional. They were not even remotely close to the energy level or anything that the Rams were prepared to, for the game with. And it just frustrated me as somebody that I saw it right away. And it's like, you guys are just going through the motions here. You guys have no energy. You guys have no spirit. And it comes from the coach too. I mean, O'Connell didn't seem to exude any sort of energy or anything to kind of, get these guys rolling. I don't know, just completely frustrated. Just pissed me off.
Yeah. I think one of the things I realized on Thursday on a couple of shows, the last time Minnesota played the Rams, they were off the Lions game. And this last time that they played Minnesota yesterday, they were off the Lions game too. Winner get that seed in the bye. And that was frustrating. It was Sunday Night Football. Now they had to relocate first to LA to Arizona. They couldn't. they just didn't have enough time to recalibrate Sam Darnold in that particular situation. And this was almost a regret because I actually had, well, we all had plays voided if you bet the Rams or Minnesota early, and I had +3, and I had the money line. Debating on whether or not to reinvest on the Lions was a tough decision. I mean, on the Rams was a tough decision for me, but ultimately, because I regretted the Washington Tampa game, I didn't want to regret the Minnesota Rams, so I did rebet it. Now, my question to you, and I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you anyway. The best number I could find at +3 for the Rams actually was not a good number to me, -128. But the old Heritage offshoot Bet 105 offered me +129 on the money line. Wouldn't you take the money line at +129 over +3 at -128?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, so that's what I did, and I said, that's a very generous number to me since I wasn't even getting that on my original bet. Understanding though that this was not a Ram home game anymore. But the more I thought about it, the more I had a problem with Minnesota's offensive line. And that sure came to fruition. Aaron Jones wasn't 100% healthy. We knew that going in. That factored into the equation. But Minnesota's offensive line versus all those young guys of the Rams seemed to be a mismatch. And even though they targeted Jefferson like I thought in the first half, they didn't target him in the second half. But here's what I want your comment on, Chris, is that because you talked about Minnesota's lack of intensity or whatever. I'm rooting for the Rams, and I'm thinking, and I'm saying to my wife, I'm saying, if I were a Minnesota backer, where's the urgency? This team was letting 30 seconds off the clock in the third quarter, at the end of the first half, all throughout the fourth quarter. I would have been livid as a Minnesota backer because they didn't show any urgency ever. It's like they never even knew the hurry up offense existed.
Yeah, exactly. It just frustrating, and you can't blame it all on Darnold. I mean, there were times when they were in his face immediately. What's the guy supposed to do? But I think they broke the NFL playoff record for sack yardage loss. That goes back to the Ice Bowl, I guess.
Wow. I mean, it was an ugly look for Minnesota. It means they have to have changes. I think their offensive line has some talent, but they've underachieved in terms of allowing pass pressure, not just this year, but in previous years, even with Kirk Cousins back there. So I think they need a new offensive line coach. I haven't delved into who it is and what his philosophy is, but there's enough talent on Minnesota to be better than what they showed yesterday.
Just a brutal. I feel for the Vikings fans. It's just a brutal way. It feels like a death. The finality of chasing the number one seed to you're boosted out of here in a matter of 8 days. It's just like ugh. So it seems unfair. It just does. But that's the way it has to be.
That division's not going to get any easier, especially if the Bears hire a competent head coach.
No, I agree. We've got 2 seasons of Vikings dominating regular season and just getting bounced right away in the playoffs. Hopefully that isn't something that continues.
Only one winner in a game, and it's tough. And the Rams, they're finding their rhythm right now.
Looking at this week, I've been taking a mental note. It's sounding like nails on the chalkboard to me already. And I was trying to avoid football. I was so pissed off last night that I went to bed very early and woke up very late. And I've done very little work today on football. But I keep on hearing the same thing over and over again. And that is Houston has no chance. Kansas City is going to blow them out of the water. It's impossible. Houston could win this game. It'll be over by halftime. I've heard all of that over and over all morning from all these different areas. And it's like,
Okay. I can make, I put down on paper what are the options for these teams? How do they win the game? So here's the 4 things that I think Houston has to do to win this game. First one, Nico. They need Collins to have that kind of day he had against the Chargers because Houston doesn't get a lot of mileage out of its tight ends. So they need Nico Collins to have a big day. Secondly, Mixon. We saw him get the tough yards. He didn't run for a lot of yards per carry. This Kansas City's run defense is much improved, but you still need to have Mixon win on 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3, whatever he does, push the pile and stuff like that. You need Nico, you need Nico, you need Mixon. You have to confuse Mahomes. Houston's very good at that because they have a tremendous pass defense. However, Mahomes was 28 out of 41 not that long ago against Houston. And that if that happens, then Houston won't have done its job. So pretty much Houston is going to have to do something to disrupt Mahomes while having their 2 stars do a really good job offensively.
I agree with all those things. How good is Kansas City's pass defense this year?
Mediocre. Typical, unfortunately or fortunately for them, they have a guy named Mahomes. So he gets that thing we talked about a few weeks ago. Do you get a pass if you have a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady, or a Pat Mahomes? And the answer is yes, unless you have a horrendous pass defense. They don't have a horrendous pass defense. It's probably in the C- range. But now they've had 23 days to acclimate the guys to get ready. And they are overall, in my opinion, a better team than they were a year ago when both of us, just everything fell into place a year ago. But now you're going to have a healthy Kelsey. You're going to have that angry runner Pacheco, who's as healthy as he's been. He's even healthier than he was a year ago. And he was rounding into shape. And now you're going to see an angry Pacheco run very, very well. You're going to see Spagnuolo, when he's not going out on these interviews, hopefully devise a game plan that will frustrate CJ Stroud. And the biggest change for them is they have 2 veteran wide receivers that they didn't have 12 months ago in Hopkins and Brown, along with the rookie Worthy. There's a lot of weapons at their disposal. So Houston has to probably rise above in order to do those things that I said, because I think Kansas City is a very, very good team this year.
How are they going to do stopping Mixon?
They're going to hold them yards per carry. But again, the battle is what happens on 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, 3rd and 2. Who wins when Nixon carries the ball and tries to drive the pile for the first down? Because if Houston wins, Mahomes stays on the sideline. Chris, you and I know it from the past. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Pat Mahomes, the way they beat you is they get in rhythm, and then it's impossible to stop them once they get in rhythm. The only way you can get Mahomes out of rhythm is to keep him on the sideline.
Well, that's true.
So it's a fascinating chess match, but Kansas City's week off gives them the edge.
Yeah, of course. Stroud still didn't look comfortable the entire game last week. Did you ever see a comfort level from him?
No, his offensive line a little beat up. I think they took an injury or 2 during the game as well. And I think his comfort level will be tested by Kansas City's savviness in terms of defense. But I will say this, Stroud is still capable of hitting the big play with Nico Collins or whatever. And those 2 or 3 chances that they have the big play, they have to connect on one of them at least.
We have a weather forecast?
Didn't look at that game. Probably should have. I only looked at one game. What do you got?
I don't know. I don't have weather anywhere for some reason.
Something tells me Pacheco's going to have a good game. That I'm going to think about it a little bit more because this is Tuesday. I haven't delved into it.
why is the Chiefs are really banged up? It says.
I don't know. I mean, how much can you read into that? Because they haven't played a meaningful game in a while.
Wow. We need to look into that more. I mean, it's the six score has Kansas City's health rating really bad.
All right, let's do that for Thursday. I'll make it a homework assignment for me to delve into any health issues.
You know, they redid their website in the middle of the year, the worst possible time you could do it, and I have zero comfort level with the new website. I can't navigate it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'll look into, one of the things people should look into with health issues is, are they cluster issues? Is it 2 or 3 offensive linemen? Is it 2 or 3 defensive backs? If it's an isolated person here, there, or whatever, I'm not as worried.
Where are these numbers coming from? This makes no sense. I don't even.
Well, you guys sometimes on Wednesday discuss 6 scores and stuff like that. Maybe Jared can offer more insight as to.
It really looks like there's an error on their site, because it's.
Yeah.
I can't. This isn't making any sense. So we'll pass on it.
Yeah, I'd be. I was surprised when you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think there's an error on the site. I'll check into it. It makes no sense because I'm checking a few different ways and I'm not finding where they're getting this. Oh, so Houston's got their previous playoff experience.
Right. Yeah. No situational edges that way or disadvantages for Houston. It's really about what we think of KC.
Yeah. Next game, Lions at home against Washington. I think that's an interesting game. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, let me start by asking you questions because you know the Lions, obviously. What do you think happened during the bye week for Detroit as far as health, as far as scheme, as far as game planning, aggressiveness? Where do you read the Dan Campbell Detroit Lions having their first playoff bye maybe in their history?
Thanks to YZ guy, he mentions that it's going to be high 20s in Kansas City, 10-mile-an-hour winds. A little colder than I think that probably works in Kansas City's favor also.
Yeah.
I think the Lions needed the break, and just aggravating as hell that you've got all of our coaches were interviewing, but I guess if that's done, they only open a short window that they're even allowed to do that, which is, that's nice. But Campbell's response was that they've been on display the entire season, and it's time for them to perform. So I think that they will. I think they'll be ready to go. I think you and I talked about it though, and have a little bit of apprehension with the mobile quarterback situation. I think that the Lions are vulnerable to mobile quarterbacks. So a little bit worried about that. I think the Lions' game plan has to be to keep Jaden off the field. They don't want to get into a high variance type game or a shootout or anything goofy. I would think the Lions just come take care of business, ball control, short passing, running, keep Washington on the sidelines, and just be real methodical and businesslike. I don't think that I think it would be unwise of them to go into the game and try to necessarily shoot for the big play right off the bat or anything like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I have two issues that concern me with the Lions, but but we can talk about their strengths as well. The issues I have is they're aggressive, but also grabby on defense. Depending on the referee crew or depending on how obvious it is, they're still susceptible. If Daniels breaks containment, we know he's fast and whatever, and he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. If he gets a chance to throw downfield, the Lions are going to be hit with pass interference because they're very grabby back there, and that's a problem. The other thing I would want out of Dan Campbell is you can be aggressive, but don't open up the playbook with this, that, and the other, because if it backfires, it gives an underdog confidence. And instead of giving the underdog confidence, you want to ram it right at them. I don't know how healthy Montgomery is. Maybe you know more about what's going on with the local news or whatever, but that's an asset for the Lions because Washington is vulnerable to the run game. They didn't get to show it as much. I mean, they stopped the run a little bit against Tampa, but Tampa didn't have the ball much. We talked about that. The combination of Montgomery and Gibbs, if they're both 100%, is just a tremendous asset for the Lions.
Yeah, I agree. And, Tampa Bay isn't known for, running it down people's throats either. So I think I still think that I will. This was an oddity. I forgot. For the first time in 2 years, my objective model leaned against the Detroit Lions with this many points. So
in this game,
yep, it's the model says it's too many points, and it's been 2 full seasons where it's been Lions. So just wanted to mark that momentous occasion.
I think Washington needs more than Daniels to be competitive in this game. I mean, everybody knows what Daniels can do, and he's done a great job. But I think they need some versatility in the run game. And what I saw out of Austin Eckler a couple of days ago was the return of some of what made him good with the Chargers, that elusiveness in the pass game as well as the run game. So I think they need to get Eckler going in terms of that. They need to get Zacharias going in the pass game because he seems to have some moves that could get him open as well. So they need to use some secondary weapons in this game, Washington, to keep Detroit honest. But something I mentioned to you, because you phrased this question 2 or 3 weeks ago, I do think Sam Laporta is back as tight end, and I do think he's a weapon that will cause some concern for Washington.
I believe Washington had their 3rd game this season with 0 turnovers and 0 punts.
Yeah, 3rd, maybe even 4th, I think. It's just crazy what's going on. I mean, where that organization was a year ago to where they are now is incredibly impressive. And this will be interesting. He's so composed, but I do have a technical factor that is definitely not in Washington's favor.
Have you noticed anything on Lattimore? It was funny because I was trying to find out some stats on Lattimore, and I kept running across these articles about how he can, completely humiliates Evans every time, and there's a big rivalry. And since he joined Washington, in my opinion, every time I see him, he looks like shit. He's drawing penalties. He's getting beaten. Just seems past his prime. And that could just be selective memory on my part. But what do you think? He wasn't looking good for the first half of that game yesterday, or when they played. I'm not sure. I didn't see how he performed the rest of the game.
I think Tampa had 44 offensive plays total. I mean, it was crazy. And Evans was dominating him. I mean, Evans would have clearly had over 100 yards in a normal game flow. against Lattimore. Lattimore's not quite ready to be put on an island. I mean, I know he's dominated Evans in the past, but Evans is still a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. And you don't get those all the time. I don't know what their coverage will be against St. Brown or some of the other guys. Lattimore could have some success against some of the secondary receivers. I don't know how they'll deploy him. But I would call Lattimore probably 60% of what he, to capacity right now. I think you're asking a lot if you're going to make him the focal point of your defense.
Yeah, I agree. I was just curious whether you'd seen that same drop off, because we used to sit there and comment about how critical he was for that Saints defense, and I can't imagine the backup being worse than what I saw, him doing out there.
J.C. Horn, to Doug's comment, J.C. Horn is somebody I liked from the get-go, but he's been hurt a few times too. But I think J.C. Horn hasn't reached his potential yet.
So you think the Lions are going to have their way with Washington?
Yeah, I have to be creative with the Lions. And so how do you get them down to -7, for example? So we can talk offline about some of the stuff that I did. But yeah, I would be on Detroit or nobody in this game because of the technical factors, because of the versatility of the Lions, and Daniels is capable, but boy, oh boy, that's a one-person show. I just think Washington. Remember, Washington is, what have they now, 5 or 6 straight games where they've won in the last 6 seconds or the last play of the game. I mean, everything's tilting their way, and to their credit, it's tilting their way because of the culture and because of what's going on. But this is a step up.
This is going to be their 3rd road game in a row, maybe, or 3rd or 4th road game in a row. I'm not sure.
Yeah, somebody had that happen last week, and it cost them.
Chargers were on their 3rd game.
Yeah, that wasn't good, and also playing on the Saturday didn't make it any better.
The next game, the Rams in Philadelphia. I'm sure you got a lot to say on this one.
Well, the Rams targeted Cooper Kupp, once a decade or something like that. I think Cooper Kupp has to step up in this game if the Rams are going to be.
He was invisible until, was it late 2nd quarter or 3rd quarter?
3rd quarter, he made a catch that Cooper Kupp can make. Other receivers would have dropped the ball. If Cooper Kupp drops the ball, he has 0 catches in the game. So he's kind of been invisible for 5 or 6 weeks. And he takes it in stride because he's an extremely team-oriented player. But I think that's got to stop now. Philly's defense is so much better than it was a year ago defending the pass that you need all hands on deck. And we don't know if Higbee's going to be back. The word I got this morning is that he could still play. They took him to the hospital, precautionary reasons, because he was coughing up some blood. So they think he has a chance to play, but I don't think he'll be featured as much as he was featured in that Minnesota game. The Rams, they're talking about the Rams. They pulled something that maybe the audience isn't familiar with because it's probably a younger audience and they weren't born yet, or they were in diapers or something like that. But John Madden with Ken Stabler and Fred Biletnikoff and all those guys, they used to pass the hell out of the ball the first half to set up the run in the second half. And I thought that's what the Rams did with Stafford. They had no intention of ignoring Kieran Williams, but they got Minnesota in a rhythm where Stafford was, 9 out of the first 10 plays or 7 of the first 8 plays were all passes. And eventually they reverted back to the run, moved the chains, and did what they had to do. I love that kind of game planning. I think a lot of coaches brought their A game to the table last week.
Yeah, you would have thought that the Rams would have the late game on Sunday. It is a little unfair, but they wanted the marquee game at night. You think that's much of a difference, though?
The only difference is that they had to relocate for this game on short notice. They're going to go home. They're going to spend time with their family or whatever. They're going to assess whatever's going on. And then they have to compartmentalize, which hopefully a lot of these guys will do. They're rookies. They're young. Maybe some of them don't have families yet and stuff like that. And then go right back on the road to Philadelphia. What I've seen in this game, and maybe it's a break that it's earlier because the snow's really going to start. If you look at the weather right now, the snow is really going to start a little bit later. They may get some fourth quarter flurries, but it sounded like it was going to snow into the evening there as opposed to the 4:30 to 7:30 window period or whatever this game is. So anything the Rams could do to avoid weather conditions that maybe some of them are not familiar with. But Cris, here we go again. How many games in a row can Stanford just play? I mean, he had no turnover-worthy throws, in my opinion, yesterday, which surprised me because I thought he would throw an interception and I paid the price for it because he didn't. But is there a way that Philadelphia could take Stafford out of his rhythm? Because he looks pretty good these last few weeks.
Where did you put the line for this game?
Okay, let me see where I put the line. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to put it. I put the line. I didn't even set the line. How nice of me. So I would probably have set the line 6.5. 2.5, 4.5. I would probably set it 6.5, and I know it's 6, maybe a little bit of 5.5.
I probably should be banned from even commenting on any games the Rams play because everything that I say is basically not turned out to be what happened. So there's something bizarre with this team that does not show up within my model as good. So, but to answer your question on the Stafford thing, the Rams looked way too good, and I think the Eagles looked way too bad last week. And I think you see kind of an inversion of that where the Eagles have to know that they have to play better, and they will play better. And Hurts has a game under his belt. The Rams have to deal with the travel issues. They seemed pretty emotional and really high for that game last night. And there's got to be some sort of a come down effect. I think just the way that both of their first games went kind of works against the Rams in a lot of ways. And
yeah, I kind of agree with that, but I don't know how to work it into the handicapping perfectly. So it's Tuesday, so I have more time to figure that out. I'm curious what Barkley's performance is going to be against the Rams. The Rams aren't necessarily fantastic against the run, but they do have a lot of guys shooting gaps, and so the Rams have a lot of variety as pass rushers, and the Eagles have one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. So it's really going to be interesting from that standpoint. And from LA's standpoint, I don't think they'll have tremendous success in the run game. They have to just hope that they could have a similar effect that Josh Jacobs had with Green Bay until everybody got hurt with Green Bay, because I think that's the ceiling for the Rams in terms of the run game. So this is really about Stafford and the pass game for the Rams, in my opinion. Yeah. So that comment about Jalen Hurts, and I don't know what Jalen Hurts is capable of either right now. I think he's going to have to run more than he did last week, and I think he will. How much success Barkley has might dictate the rest of the action. It's a game that I have to handicap a lot more. I don't have answers or even questions right now.
do you give the Rams a shot at winning the game?
Sure, I do, because McVay has really punched all the right buttons the last 6 weeks, so why not? I think I agree with you that Philly didn't play its best game last week, and they're capable of much better. I think Philly is capable of representing the NFC in the Super Bowl, but I just don't want to I just think the Rams, there's something about them, they're coached very well, that it also wouldn't surprise me if Stafford stayed turnover free again, that the Rams couldn't pull something out of the hat.
Yeah, and I agree with this comment. Ted's interviews, certainly with all the Rams players on Thursday, really were uniform in confidence and just the frame of mind that they all were in. It was loose it was painfully obvious that they were not paranoid or down on themselves or anything but highly confident, not overconfidence, but just in a great space.
Absolutely correct. And Ted is planning to be at practice either today or tomorrow. So maybe we get some more insight for this coming week.
Yeah, as a Lions fan, I don't want to face the Rams just because it's a psychological unknown issue. I realize the Lions have to get past Washington first, but it's just an uneasy storyline we don't want to deal with.
Yeah, I think the I'll take the other aspect of it. I think the Lions are very confident if they go against the Rams. I think Jared Goff is very confident that he'll be able to move the ball consistently.
I will give you that. I was thinking about it last night, actually, that, we don't want to face the Rams, but then I did actually gravitate to what you just said. They seem pretty confident against them, though. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
So Buffalo and Baltimore, wow. Where do you want to go with this one?
I'm glad that these two have to play each other. Everybody's rooting for a Buffalo-Detroit Super Bowl.
Oh.
One thing I know is I think people want Baltimore out of the way. Nobody wants a Baltimore Super Bowl that I keep on hearing.
Yeah, Baltimore would be formidable if they finally broke through. If Lamar actually broke through and got to the Super Bowl, that would ease a lot of the concerns of his playoff performances the past few years. Got a stat for you. You could use it tomorrow or whatever. Buffalo was sacked more than one time, not very many times this year. Twice they allowed 2 sacks, and only once this entire season has the Buffalo offensive line allowed 3 sacks, which is an amazing stat when the Giants and the Minnesota Vikings are getting sacked as we speak right now, even if they're not playing. The Baltimore Ravens sacked Josh Allen 3 times when they played. That was the most this entire season.
Well, that was a different team for Buffalo. They were missing a lot of Baltimore. What were the?
It was a long time ago. It was in September.
Yeah, what was that? Buffalo was missing all their players.
Yeah, Buffalo was still. Buffalo never became a great defensive team, not even close. But they certainly weren't ready then. They had some injuries at that point. I think somebody told me that Derrick Henry ran 87 yards the first time he touched the ball, and it was all downhill from there in terms of what happened. So you can glean some stuff from that game as to what will happen and what won't happen. I do think Buffalo has a variety of weapons that they're going to use in this game. I will say this, if Buffalo plays as well as they played against Denver and with that intensity and being at home and being a perhaps disrespected home dog, the power ratings support a game of pick'em, but Buffalo's not. The Buffalo players don't care about odds or this or that. Somebody mentions that they're the underdog and they're at home, they're gonna take it personal. If Buffalo plays with the same emotion, we've got a barn burner of a game coming.
Yeah, I think my immediate reaction was being annoyed that Baltimore became the favorite, even though they deserve to be, just because that's just going to really give Buffalo
Exactly.
even more focus of being disrespected. I do like that line. The Vikings should have brought in Daniel Jones to take a couple of sacks.
Yeah, no question he would have been able to do it. Yeah. I was talking about that last night. I said that's probably the wrong quarterback to bring in if you need to replace Darnold.
I agree with Tommy Lorenzo. You can't trust Harbaugh in game coaching.
Yeah. So here's a weird thing. When Buffalo played Baltimore in September, no wide receiver other than the infamous Nelson Aguilar caught more than one pass in that game. 9 completions out of the 13 that Lamar Jackson threw because they didn't use him late in the fourth quarter. 9 completions to running backs in that game for Baltimore. Kind of interesting.
Wow. I still think Baltimore is the better team.
What's that? Chiefs and Lions multi-bet at minus 250. What does that mean?
I think that's a money line parlay.
Yeah, so just for information purposes only, it probably has changed. But if you took Kansas City and not -7, and you took Detroit -7, you would be plus 198 on the money on the bet. 100 to win 198 if you laid 7 in both games.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
Just threw that out there. Yeah, I agree with what you said before. Baltimore is the better team. Now they have to prove it in an environment that's going to be incredible.
You have any predictions there?
I have a feeling I'm not going to play this game. Maybe if we, because I don't want that feeling that Buffalo's a home dog. Maybe if as we get closer to game and if Buffalo becomes a 1-point favorite or something like that, I'll change my mind. But
Do we have a Zay Flowers update?
Not yet. I think Wednesday's practice will be the first time we'll get a sense as to where he is, which is tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that really pissed me off about losing last night is I had a bunch of Baltimore plus 8.5, plus 11.5 tied in with Minnesota, and it just went poof.
Oh, so you got to reset, and unfortunately, you're resetting without.
Yeah, I can't.
Action.
So that just a domino of headaches there. At this point, I don't think the line can keep going up. So if you're on Baltimore, I think you might as well just wait. I would think. I'm not going to guarantee it, but if you like Buffalo, where do you think this line's going to go? That it's going to be getting much better than where it is.
Yeah, you'd say 2 is kind of a liver number in the NFL because of the strategies of going for this and that, whatever. But 1 isn't any more or less, I feel, a strategy number than it used to be. So if it's +1, -1, there's not a lot of difference other than emotionally or the mind game kind of thing. I kind of feel like it ends pick 'em.
Well, you can grab 1.5 on Buffalo right now. So
yeah,
I just don't see 2s popping up. To you?
It shouldn't. That would be a little bit high. What do you think Buffalo's strategy will be against Derrick Henry?
Probably tripping penalties.
I mean,
I don't know. I mean, this you just can't get the bad taste of that Kansas City game plan in the playoffs last year out of your mouth with Baltimore. Baltimore should carve up this defense, and you wonder whether Harbaugh is going to have some goofy strategy where they just don't do the right things.
Yeah, my concern with John Harbaugh is if they stop Henry early, do they all of a sudden forget about him later? When you know he gets stronger and he punishes people when he runs, they know they can't have the same game plan they had against Kansas City last year when they had one running back run in the first half.
Right.
So they're going to run Henry in this game in the first quarter, let's say first 20 minutes. The problem I have is reverse from last year. What if they stopped running him for any reason?
Well, I mean, if you don't know you're supposed to run him into the ground and he's going to wear down the defense, then I don't know what to tell these people.
And conversely, the strategy for Baltimore is, what are you going to do against Josh Allen? Because he's had just a wonderful season and he just hasn't turned the ball over this year.
Well, you don't change your game plan. You have to go with what's been working. You know.
Yeah.
Montgomery's a full practice today. No labels. To answer your question from earlier.
Well, that's fuel for the fire. If you get 100% of Montgomery, that really changes the dynamic against a weak link in Washington, the run defense.
I think they even on 2 weeks rest. They really ran Gibbs that last game. I don't think. I don't think they want to give him a heavy workload again either.
In the pass game, maybe, but not like that in the run game.
Right.
Yeah. Is this another in-game Baltimore kind of situation where you take Baltimore in the first quarter, you win a lot of plays. Then it's halftime and you say, well, Baltimore's going to give up the first score or so, bless you, in the third quarter. Then Baltimore's going to use the closer, Henry. And it just seems like Baltimore games are a lot of in-game type opportunities nowadays.
I think they've been different this year. I think they've been harder to read. They haven't been as dependable second half holdups as they were in the past.
Yeah, I think it's more of a third quarter and less of a fourth quarter fold-up than it used to be because they have Henry. So we'll see about that. But this game's in Buffalo. I didn't check the weather in Buffalo, but I mean, these guys are used to cold weather, but we'll see.
It did look like Pittsburgh was going to be able to have a shot at getting back into that game, and it's more on Pittsburgh's shoes that they didn't. What do you think?
I think it's part of Baltimore's MO. They let you go back in game, and then they use their talent. They hope to use their talent to close them out anyway.
Yeah, I had heard it was going to be like 8 degrees. I don't know whether that's true or not.
I'm staying indoors then. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating game. At this moment, I'm not going to be involved in it, but we'll see. It's only Tuesday.
The Lions are looking pretty darn healthy, actually. They only had 3 players on no practice: Pat O'Connor, Ennis Rackstraw, and Kevin Zittler.
Steve says cold in the teens. That's cold.
Yeah, you know what?
Just the
I'm
way
freezing
Buffalo
here every night in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the indoor heater on in Southern California, so I can't speak to cold.
I was surprised to notice this morning that Kansas City was getting bet up. I was surprised to see Detroit getting bet up. And I think the Baltimore line's peaked up.
I wonder if Detroit is going to touch 10 at various times.
Well, the public shops are getting Detroit action, so I would think that at the public books, you might see a 10 hit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Houston KC may kind of go back and forth because in the end, people know that Kansas City hasn't won by margin a lot this year.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of teaser liability going into this week.
Yeah. Again, it's winner take all. And I know, and other people know, we had some teasers that didn't work this past week because the Chargers had to keep throwing. They threw interceptions. Denver was outmatched and they got behind the chains too much. 7-point teasers, maybe they hit against Green Bay because the line was 5.5 or whatever, but 6-point teasers were in trouble. Minnesota had some trouble. So it's every week, every kind of sequence on these winner take alls is a completely different thing. You really have to know that they're not going to get blown out.
Yeah, the wild card round has not produced the closest of games traditionally. So
Yeah.
Things get a little bit back to normal in this round.
Yeah. It can happen. You just have to look at the matchups and just say, hey, this is the sample. These are the matchups we're dealing with this week. How does that translate?
Did you like it better when the two teams sat and we had 6 playoff teams? I mean, because these 7 teams, these 7 seeds don't win.
Yeah, I did like it better. Eventually, we'll have more teams, and I don't know. It's weird that we haven't had expansion for a while. I know that the talent level might be diluted, even though the colleges are prepping pros for pro action a little better. But at some point, I thought we'd see 2 more teams added. I thought we'd see a St. Louis team certainly within the next couple of years to make up for what happened there, but hasn't happened. Not that I want that.
Well, if there's any league that could actually absorb expansion at this point, when you really think about, I mean, when you look at the like basketball and NBA and baseball, they kept expanding, and there were too many teams that literally didn't even have a star on their team. I mean, they were already also Rams. When you look at the NFL and you see all these great quarterbacks coming into the league, and you're just seeing the talent pool kind of growing finally. I mean, you're seeing, and I hope that they don't expand, but I had the thought this morning, actually, by coincidence, was just, technically you could add a couple of teams just because everybody knows everybody on every team at this point. You know what I mean? It's not like a bunch of no names like they do in NBA and MLB and such. So from that perspective, you could have an expansion, but by gosh, it feels like the NFL is becoming a couple of what the NCAA conferences were at one time, where you get to follow these teams and you get to follow these players, and there's always going to be great players losing, and great players may never even make the Super Bowl. And it just makes things a lot more dramatic. It makes the importance of each game just so much greater. And when you look at the matchups this week, Baltimore and Buffalo, it's a shame that one of those 2 teams have got to go. The Rams and Philly, that seems like a good matchup. I guess they nobody really needs to see Houston or Washington advance, but they are nice storylines. The Washington storyline is better than the Houston storyline. I think everybody wants Houston. Yeah. I don't think people want to see Houston win.
No, I don't think they do, but you're right. That Washington story is a really, really neat story. So, and we had this a couple years ago where it was a coin flip every single game in terms of especially the AFC playoffs, but also some of the NFC playoffs. And we're going to get that. The regular season was just weird in terms of you had so many bad teams, more than usual. They were just really bad. And that's a topic for another day. But if these teams do not value the draft, or they continue to make the same mistakes they've made draft after draft after draft, they're going to stay bottom teams. They're never going to fix their franchise unless they take the draft with a little bit more seriousness. One final question I have for you, Cris. I looked at this beforehand and I just don't see value. But we had this discussion a year ago when we found value. I look at the odds to make the Super Bowl or odds to win the Super Bowl, odds to win the NFC, odds to win the AFC. I didn't really see any value there. Any thoughts?
No, there's no value. It's ridiculous. It's
Yeah. Last year we did with Kansas City. This year we don't.
yeah, it's remarkable how little value there is.
Yeah.
And
Disappointed.
yeah, and it seems a little bit more wide open too, or it seemed a little bit more wide open, at least in the NFC. But right now, it feels like a disappointment if the Lions don't make it to the Super Bowl. I think, you know, the Rams are a decent story. Philadelphia is a good team, but it really just feels like it's supposed to be the Lions' year.
Yeah, with respect to knowing that the Rams have a chance, and certainly Buffalo, Baltimore could be a dogfight or whatever, the matchups I'd want to see would be Philly and Detroit, because in my opinion, that would be a world-class matchup, a strategy matchup. And I would like to see Baltimore get another crack at KC, even though KC's improved this year. So is Baltimore in some respects. So those are the matchups I'd like to see, but we'll take whatever we get.
Just
Texans.
what do you think about this Texans question?
To not get blown out. I don't really think I think they're thinking this is Stroud year 2. We have Joe Mixon. We didn't have Joe Mixon last year. We've got to do everything we can to do something about Mahomes. Their focus is really about this game. I don't think DeMeco Ryans is thinking about anything but how he's going to game plan in this game. And if they get blown out, they get blown out because, Kansas City's a better team on paper than Houston. But I think as far as focus and preparation, all that's on their mind is what can we do better against Kansas City that we didn't do about 4 weeks ago when they lost by 9 points.
Yeah, I agree 100%. They're not looking ahead. They're putting it all into this one. So yeah. I think you're going to get max effort and focus.
Well, that's all I got for this week. We're down to the last whatever number of games, 7 NFL games and 1 college game. So winding down. And tomorrow the paperwork begins.
That sounds good. We'll be back on Thursday at noon, right?
Thursday at noon, maybe some interviews and maybe a little bit more in terms of what we know about injuries and other stuff.
That sounds good. We'll catch you guys later.